Thank you. And thank you for having me. My name is Paolo Gasti. I'm an associate professor at the New York Institute of Technology. I'm also the CTO of Keyless. And today I'd like to go over cloud biometrics and their security aspects, their risk and challenges, and how these can be mitigated. So let's get started. The first thing that I would like to go over is biometric authentication, just to set the stage and to have familiarity with some of the common terminology. So, what is biometric authentication? Right? It's the idea of using some human traits. You can think of face, your fingerprint, your iris. These are all traits that we're familiar to, or traits that are maybe we are more or less familiar with, such as rhythms, so how users type, hand movement, users hold their smartphone and how they interact with it as they're using it, and to use this trait to distinguish between a genuine user, so user that owned a computer or a smartphone and is supposed to use it, from everybody else, someone that might have had access to this device. The main characteristics, one of the most important characteristics we're looking for when we're talking about biometrics is distinctiveness, which means that two individuals will be different with respect to this particular trait. Two people will have different faces, different fingerprints, but they also be different, for instance, in how they type on a keyboard or on an on-screen phone, or how they use their phone. And this is important, of course, because the more distinctive a biometric is, typically the more secure it is. But it's also a risk, because the more distinctive a biometric is, automatically means that the more privacy-related information, the more privacy-relevant information associated with that biometrics. And how does a biometric system work, right? So we have typically two phases. One, enrollment phase, where the system gets to know how a person looks like with respect to one of these traits. So the user will provide a biometric sample, we'll extract some features, we'll process this data, we'll make sure that we're looking at the real user. And after this process, we come up with what is called a biometric template. So a representation of the user with respect to that particular trait, again, face, fingerprint, typing patterns, and so forth. Once this is done, that's the maybe more interesting part here, is the authentication per se, right? We'll take another fresh sample of the user, we'll sample their face, we'll extract the same features that we extracted during enrollment, we'll reload the template from somewhere, and we will match this template with the biometric features that we just collected and extracted. If the two match, user in, right, we unlock the phone, their bank account. But if the two do not match, we assume that we're dealing with an imposter. We don't give access to the user to whatever resources they're trying to access. Now, as I said, the biometric will be stored somewhere, and where it's stored is very important, right? And it is very important for privacy and security purposes. But before we get there, why do we want to use biometrics in the first place, right? There are many important aspects of biometrics. So one is that they're hard to phish and they're very easy to use. Compared with passwords, right? Password can be communicated over the phone, over an email. They can be entered in their own form and therefore being communicated to an. But none of this is true with biometrics. A properly designed biometric system is and is very reliable, very low error rates, at least for face, fingerprint, and other standard modalities. Those are very fast, very easy to use, very little to no user training is required. And a very important thing about biometric is that they're strongly tied to a particular person. A password doesn't prove that it's me. It just proves that I'm someone that knows that password. But a biometric is different. If I can prove that this face that I have is the one that was enrolled, then it's me. It cannot be. It's very unlikely that it's someone else. Much more unlikely than with a password. I cannot share biometrics, and if implemented properly, all these together results in lower implementation cost. And as I was saying, where user profile and when the user template to do this matching is stored, identifies which type of biometrics we're talking about. One common modes is to store this template on the device that has been authenticated. What it means is that, for instance, I have a template I generate, right, when I enroll with Face ID or Touch ID, for instance, and that template never leaves my device. So both the matching operation, right, the comparison of that template and a fresh biometric sample, both operation and the storing of that template themselves, they're all happening within the confines of the device. On the other hand, we could store this template somewhere else and also do the matching somewhere else, for instance, on the cloud. This would lead to something that is a cloud-based biometrics, right? So both, again, the template is stored outside of the device, and the matching, therefore, is going to be done outside of the device. And each of their pros and cons, right? If we, for instance, if we look at on-device biometric, local biometrics, the good thing is that data never leaves the device, which is a great feature from the point of view of privacy. Biometric data is very sensitive, PII, and therefore never leaving is really a positive feature of these systems. But unfortunately, that's more or less where we stop. If you have, with positive aspects at least, if you have multiple, you will have to enroll your biometrics multiple times, which at the same time not a great user experience, but also not great from a security, because this weakens the link between you, who you are, and a particular account. There's no way to know if you have two phones, or a phone and a tablet, or a laptop and a tablet, and you enroll separately. There's no way to know that it's the same person enrolling on both. This is even more the case when you're using a fingerprint on one and a face on the other. There's no way for the system to link these two pieces of information other than knowing that there's a very weak link between the user and identity and their biometric data. So weak that if you're authenticating remotely, right, if I'm using this to authenticate a bank transfer, for instance, or to access my bank account, this counts effectively as not as a biometric factor, as an inherence factor, but rather it counts as device authentication factor. The remote cannot tell whether an actual biometric authentication happened. They only see the and cannot tell which template we use to authenticate the user, right? They cannot tell if this is the user they expected or someone that happens to match with the biometric data stored on that device. To compound to that, so if the device is lost or stolen, so is the biometric data. So any trust that a remote party might have had built over time on that particular device and pairing device and biometrics, that is all gone. And so our recovery flows are going to be more difficult, right? The user will new device and you can re-enroll on that device. Those are going to be difficult because the biometric data is gone, and also risks are going to be a great way to attack the system. Cloud-based biometrics address a lot of these issues. Right? If you can see here on the slide that the first thing is that if I enroll and I store my template remotely outside of the device, that template can be accessed by multiple devices. So I only need to enroll once. I don't have to re-enroll if I lose my phone or my computer. I don't have to re-enroll if if for some reason my phone breaks and I have to buy a new one. And the recovery therefore also much smoother, simply because by getting a new device, I can authenticate with the template that is stored on the cloud. And finally, we have a stronger link between the user and their biometrics. Once I establish the template that I'm the identity of this user, this information is valid throughout time. So that's a great benefit. Unfortunately, there are still some major gaps in this type of biometrics, which is what I'd like to dive a little, which is the cloud, obviously, because it has access to the template, also has access to the user, which is less than ideal for privacy and compliance reasons. We are creating a central honeypot where everybody's is stored, and therefore accessing and compromising that has pretty important consequences. If there is some compromise of that data, that the consequences are quite important. And as that there's a high risk of data exfiltration. Just the fact that all this data is concentrated in one place, really hard to not only to protect, but also makes, again, exfiltration easier and more potential. Right, and to go a little bit deeper on this, there are, if you look at this from a point of view of privacy and privacy challenges, ideally what you want with any data, but in particular with biometric, is protection when the data is at rest, when the data is in use. Right? At rest, for instance, if you're dealing with cloud biometric, you could encrypt this data, but you would have a way when you need to match it. So at rest, maybe we can do something, but definitely in use, there's not much we can do based on traditional cloud-based biometrics. Again, that's more or less a solved problem. We can use TLS or other forms of encryption, but the main open challenge is data in use. The cloud-based biometric system, they all need to have access to the biometric data at the point of matching, and there are important privacy consequences to that. There are techniques to do data anonymization. There are techniques to do tokenization of biometric data and so forth, but there is very limited. The biometric data is the ultimate PII. There's nothing more there's nothing the user better than their biometric data, and therefore simply anonymizing, moving information about the user or doing certain kind of one-way transformation doesn't really change the nature of the problem. We're still dealing with meaningful impacts in case of in case of data exfiltration. So to summarize these points, again, data exfiltration is the main challenge. DNA is not really something that is suitable, especially for biometrics. And all this leads to lack of security, but also lack of compliance. If you look at GDPR in Europe, but also PDPA and CC the world, you're starting to see that big data has been, the use and the storage of biometric data has been further and further restricted for very good reasons. And these systems, this based system, as I'm describing them now, they're clearly not, it's going to be very hard to make them suitable in a market where compliance is very strict. So again, in addition to security risk, compliance is a main issue. Fortunately, there are other ways to store and process many of the risks and many of the challenges that I described now. So one of them is the use of secure multi-party computation with biometric data. Right? The goal for this system is to address all the downsides of cloud-based biometrics while keeping all the benefits. All the benefits where there's no biometric data on the user's device, and therefore we can use a multitude of devices to authenticate. We can enroll only once. We don't have to enroll multiple times. Recovery flows are straightforward. But then, in addition to all this, we don't want a central honeypot. We can achieve again these goals with this protocol that I'll in a second. There's no risk of data exfiltration because the data is simply not there. There are no compliance issues. This sounds a little too good to be true, right? All the benefits that we built with cloud-based biometrics, and at the same time, none of the downsides. And the idea here is that there is a little bit of magic coming from decades of research in the area of cryptography and secure multi-party computation by the community and by various companies, keyless. And the gist is that we can run over the years, over the decades, we have learned how to run computation, the necessity to decrypt it. And this is playing a pivotal role in many areas, including biometrics. Specific for biometrics, at a high level, what this looks like is that we could have an encrypted template on the cloud, and this template is very different from what you would normally have for cloud-based, because the cloud will not have the ability to decrypt it. This template is encrypted with keys that the cloud doesn't have access to. And in some system, these don't exist.
Okay,
What
Paolo,
happens though is
I
that,
am really sorry to
yep,
interrupt you, but I think it would be nice if you could kind of wrap it up and summarize the rest of the
yes,
presentation like really quickly in the interest of time. Thank you.
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So, yep. So again, the goal, we can perform every step that I was discussing earlier, all the mapping and all the process, without decrypting any of the data. As a result of that, those risks are and the regulations are at this point no longer relevant because there's no biometric data stored in any of the parts of the system. So, in other words, again, just to summarize, cloud-based biometrics are great in terms of functionality. They offer bigger downsides in terms of privacy. There are techniques out there, such as secure multi-party computation, that can be used to address these downsides without impacting any of the benefits. And with that, I'd like to open it to questions.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Paolo. That was indeed really interesting and promising. I guess, please, let's have a round of applause for Paolo.